Christmas, everybody! Are you looking for the perfect board game gift to give to all your friends and family, all with the hope of convincing them to play more board games with you throughout the year? Then you've come to the right place, because this is your ultimate Christmas gift guide. Hi, my name's Danny. I'm an avid modern board gamer from Australia. I love sharing my passion for this hobby with you, my friends, and my family. Let's get this jingle all the way! As a board game hobbyist, I often like to have games in my collection that are highly accessible. They usually have interesting theme or cool artwork, they have really tactile components, and they have a really cool table presence. These are games that have a simple rule set. They're going to be really nice stepping stones into some of the more complex board games, and they're not going to feel very intimidating. And one of my favorite games I discovered this year is a game all about collecting glass beads from a river, and it is called River Valley Glassworks. In this game, you'll be placing little different shaped gems into a river, and you'll also be gathering gems into your pan. You'll then be taking those gems from your pan and placing them on your board in different columns according to their color. The twist here is that each color has a different scarcity, and you're trying to create complete rows of different colors, but complete columns of the same color. And you're trying to max out your board by creating this array. And so at the end of the game, you'll get points for finishing rows and points for scoring for your two highest columns. There's a really nuanced level of interaction in this game where what you choose to take is going to impact the next person, and it's going to shift all of the tiles down the river. What gem you place out is going to be potentially be given to other players. And so you've got this ebb and flow of a game where you're actually collecting these really tactile gems, and the stone-like feel of these gems is super cool. I'm going to dual layer this game by saying that this game actually works brilliantly in its solo mode, because it gives you 5 different separate individual campaigns to play through of different difficulties, and boards that really change the way you draft the gems and you place the gems. Now, as someone who loves dice, I feel like whilst the randomness of the dice people complain a lot about, I actually don't always discourage the luck of a dice roll. In fact, dice games are one of my favorite because not only do they add like a physical tactile element to the game, but the way that you can use the dice to power things or activate things, if a game does that really well, it's definitely warranted as a spot in my collection. And so for this particular category, dice games, I'm going to present to you 3 tiers of games. One that's super simple, that takes like a minute to teach. One that's kind of like on the edge of medium but super light, and then one that's a lot heavier. And so the first game I want to say is, this is Stocking Stuffer Level. It is Lure. It's a game about rolling dice and fishing. So basically in this game, there's some cards with fish on them. Every player has a pool of dice. You'll declare the number of dice you'll use behind your screen, and then you'll reveal the screens, and whoever has the lowest number of dice, that means they're willing to take the greatest risk, they get to roll first. And basically different fish have different requirements. It might be having a total value of 17 or more, but also requires the face-up dice values of a 2 and a 3. And so players are kind of risking and pushing their luck to try and catch these fish. And if the fish don't get caught this round, they stay out for the next round and more fish come out. And so the pool of fish becomes larger and larger, and the way you pick up these fish is going to be better and better. And if you don't catch a fish on your turn, you get a little hook, which basically has a special ability that you can apply for a future fishing catch. The thematic ties in this game is actually really brilliant. You know, the chance of catching a fish, that feeling of sitting around on the wharf for ages, enjoying like, you know, a lovely cool beverage as you wait for that salmon to kind of bite on your hook. This kind of has that same sort of really happy fishing feeling. And as an aquarist, yes, I don't fish because I kind of like my fish to be alive. The next game is all about putting spots on Dalmatian dogs, and it is actually called Spots. And what's cool about this game is that you can bury dice if your total goes over 7, if you go bust. But the tiles that you choose to activate are little dog tricks. You can take it on a walk, you can get a dog to roll over, and they help you to manipulate and influence how you use your pool of dice. You can even get little red bones that kind of help you adjust the values of the dice. But the really cute thing about this is that you have all these little cards and you're putting these dots on the dice of where the dots would be on the dog. And so there's a really cool dice activation mechanism. You're claiming the dice on these dogs, and you're also trying to use the actions too. So very, very fun, very, very family friendly, and also very mathematical. The third dice game I want to talk to you about is one that's actually based on a previous version of this game designer's design, and that is Artifacts Inc. But this one kind of has a very steampunk rally style feel to it if you've ever played that game. It's a game about operating a caravan. You're collecting creatures along the way by feeding them food, and then they kind of join your little adventure as you head towards the capital city. It is a game called Creature Caravan. This game has so many cards in it. Everything is activated by dice, and so what you're doing is everyone is simultaneously rolling their dice and placing their dice on cards that they've already laid out. And each of the creature cards have special abilities, special scoring mechanisms, and so some will, if you put a dice value of 4 high, you'll get a coin and more food. You could even use your dice to attack ember zombies that kind of hitch a ride because they see, ooh, look, there's this whole caravan full of different creatures. Ember zombies attack, and they'll just join in. And so there's this map where you're trying to move from the western side of the map all the way to the eastern side, but there's all these different terrain things you got to get through. Throughout every round, you actually set up a little campsite, and so as you drop your camps along the way, they're also going to score based on certain creature cards, and wherever you stop, you might get certain abilities. You might gain some fruit, which actually makes the dice activation a lot easier. You might also pick up 3 cards if you're at a white tower, or you might even acquire these little chests that give you victory points and bonuses along the way. But it's the card synergy and the simultaneous gameplay and using those dice to power your movement, to power how you travel across the landscape, that makes the dice and tableau activation elements so fun. The next category of games is ones that I like to describe as middleweight Euros. These are games which really are close to my heart, because you go in, you try and churn victory points, you're doing lots of trading, and you're converting resources into powerful points. And people often describe these games as point salad games. Not kind of like the salad that you'll make on Christmas Day, the potato or pasta salad that is, but more ways, a smorgasbord of choices that leads to a smorgasbord of points that leads to a smorgasbord of fun that you're going to have at the table. These are my favorite category of games. So the 2 games I'm suggesting here are ones that I've really thoroughly enjoyed this year. In fact, they kind of operate in this way that's unique to a lot of other games in this middleweight Euro category. The first one is all about spinning around, raising and lowering water levels, and harvesting tulips and actually selling them at the market. Windmill Valley is one of my favorite middleweight Euros that I played this year. And what I really like about it is that your wheel, you actually have 2 wheels that are joined to your windmill, actually have different actions that correspond to different regions of the board. You might be going to the market to get particular species of tulips. You might be planting the tulips. You might be building windmills and a network of connecting routes so that you can access different fields and gain extra bonuses. You might trade at the ship port, or you might even gain extra ability cards and extra little segments that you can lay on top of your wheel to make the actions and the combo of actions so much more powerful. This is a game that I can't express how much fun I've actually truly had. It is a bonus point bonanza, but there's also an action bonanza where you're constantly finding different pathways to connect to ways to score points. There is a huge sense of satisfaction when you're building your 4 rows of different tulips as you try and cover up different icons to score bonuses, and not to mention the 2 wheels actually, as they kind of rotate, the combination of the 2 actions you can choose from each turn really changes. So to give someone who loves flowers, but in a board game form. Have you ever been in a disagreement with your significant other? I know I have many times. Maybe it's every single time I lose at a board game. That's probably what causes it. But I often am a fan of two-player only games because two-player only games have a very different feel about them. And one of the best dual games that I've seen, and dual games that now seems to be the flavor of the month. There's like King of Tokyo Duel, Splendor Duel. I think there might be Catan Duel at some point, but this version is a reimplementation of another duel game called Seven Wonders Duel, and this one has a new IP over it. And I'm not usually a fan of IP games, but this one is one that really improves significantly over the original game. It's Lord of the Rings Duel for Middle-earth. It's basically a card drafting game where you're going to draft cards over 3 different ages or chapters, and you're going to try and satisfy one of the 3 endgame triggering conditions. Here, what's really cool and why I like it more than Seven Wonders Duel is it takes the mechanics of Seven Wonders Duel and really extends it 2 steps further. In Seven Wonders Duel, you have this military track that kind of signifies your political and military force and it kind of created this tug of war. But here you've got this kind of area control map. You've also got this ring track where the Nazgul are chasing Frodo and Samwise Gamgee as they're trying to dump the ring in to Mount Doom. And if you're not a fan of Lord of the Rings, it actually doesn't really make that much of a difference to the gameplay because the gameplay is actually far more intuitive, far more interesting and far more cool. Instead of the wonders, you actually have these locations that you can also acquire too. I just feel like the intertwining mechanisms of the card drafting, the ring track, as well as the soldier map, and you can build towers to kind of strengthen like your strength value. This game really takes it to another level. It's simple to teach, simple to get into, but the layers of strategy feel more fleshed out. The next category is a category that I often love because it's really compact, it all fits snugly into a bag, and it doesn't take up a lot of shelf space. It is card games, and this is probably my #1 favorite card game of all time. Sea Salt and Paper. Sea Salt and Paper is such a cool set collection game. The way this game uses open and closed information is brilliant. Everything that you have in your hand, everything that's in front of you, actually is already played. And so you're collecting particular ways to score, but then you're trying to not let the other players know what you're going for. And so the game has this really cool crescendo. It's like you can play these duo cards, which is a pair of cards to do particular actions like fish from the discard. You can also draw extra cards from the top. You can steal another player's card. But then you've got these set collection elements of like gathering the shells, gathering octopuses, and gathering penguins. And then there's a penguin multiplier or using the sailor. The icons, the colors, the information that you're given helps you to make a judgment about whether to end the round or not. And that's where the meta gaming and the psychology really comes through in this game. It's like, well, if I have 7 or more points, will I be able to beat everyone else at the table? And so you use your information, you go, you know what? I think I can do it. And so you declare, I can beat you all. And everyone gets 1 more turn to try and beat you. And if you beat them, you get this really massive amount of points. And if you don't, then you have this very, very big appearance of embarrassment on your face as you put your tail between your legs and you're like, okay, I'll score the color bonus only. And hoping that you can actually outwit and outplay and outcollect the other players. Next strategy game is actually one that's a reimplementation of a Hisashi Hayashi game. And this is an oldie but a goodie, but now this year has had a re-imaging and a modernized look to it. It is Yokohama. This is probably one of the only games in my board game collection that my husband actually gave a 4 out of 4 for. And there is so many cool nuances in this game that makes it so exciting. At first, when you look at it, it can feel a little bit overwhelming, so I grant you that. But actually, when you start playing, everything really clicks together so well. And basically, you're distributing all these little assistants and moving your present across the board by using where you've laid your assistants, and the number of assistants you have at a particular location plus the number of like buildings there all adds up to a particular strength value that gives you a strength of the action that you can take at that spot. Other players who occupy different areas are also going to block off spots for you. So it might be trying to gain, lots of T tokens, or trying to trade and get tech cards. There's so many cool ways to experiment with how you're going to pre-plan where you're going to leave everything and build up your shops, so that when you go there in future turns, the magnitude of those actions are gonna be super strong. And this is got this really cool geographical spatial element as you're trying to navigate the pathways around the board. You're trying to visit different locations, trying to avoid the other players. And when a player goes to a particular area that you want to go to on the next turn, you've got to really change your plans. And so by laying out all these little assistants, you're saying to the other players at the table, hey, I'm going to be going to this place at some point, or hey, I'm going to try and head over here, in 2 turns time. The metagaming and the layers of depth and thought behind this game is super, super cool. Now, if you're like me and sometimes you think, a lot of the 2-player games that are out are pretty light, or they have a very tug-of-war feel like, well, this next game is one that I think has a greater depth of strategy and tactics to it. It is a 2-player only game called Ironwood, where one player plays as the Iron People or Iron Walkers, and the other player plays as the Wood Tribe. And basically, it's a very asymmetric, card-driven game where you're trying to fulfill your condition first while trying to prevent the other player from fulfilling their condition. Basically, the Iron player wants to build 3 forges, and the Wood player wants to summon 2 totems, which are hidden and only to their knowledge where on the map, and try and get those totems out of the forest. You've kind of got this metal versus nature kind of theme emanating through the game, because the Wood people can kind of move through the forest areas, but the Steel people have their drill and they move along the mountain ranges digging up crystals, and you get to use those crystals to power your actions. And so there's an asymmetry to how these games kind of feel. You've got the tactics of moving your troops into different regions and using the cards themselves as a way of deciding who wins a battle. And so Ironwood just has a nice mirroring, but also synergy of how the actual different tribes function, but also how everything feels tense and meets at a crescendo. I'm just untangling this game here. Just give me a sec. It reminds me of a party experience that I once had, where I went to a party and I was thinking, you know what, I'll bring some games, I'll bring something, and everyone was like, you know what, these games are really, really cool. Can we do this more often? And you know what? Party games are now so much fun. Just seeing people discover party games for the first time and go, you know what, I want to play more of this. There are more party games that we can try that are not Cards Against Humanity. Bring it on. So party games are a genre that are really important to me because it really caters for those big groups of people that just want to have a drink or have fun and just kind of socialize at the same time. And so my recommended party game for this year is Things in Rings. And you might have noticed that I had 3 different colored strings, which forms almost like a 3-tiered Venn diagram. And so in this game, what you're doing is that each ring has a particular thing that's about it. So word is all about the spelling or the structure of the word. The context is all about the position or the use of the object in society, and attributes is about the physical property. So it might be it's made of metal. Someone is going to be like the game master. They're going to draw their 3 cards, and they're going to, players are going to go around the circle. They're going to draw a hand of things. Could be a comic book, an egg, a factory, a guitar, and then you're going to be slowly placing them in these rings, and the game master is going to say, yes, you're right, and if you're right, you're going to be able to keep adding more things cards from your hand, and the first player to kind of get rid of all their cards from their hands wins the game. In order to do that, you kind of need to work out what the rule is. And so you'll start to see clusters of different things, and you'll be like, how are all of those things associated together? Well, if it's a spelling one, it might be starts with a vowel or Y. If it is an attribute, it might be the item could be bigger than a human being. And if it is a context one, then this object is very useful. And so it creates this weird marriage of knowing the words and their origins, knowing how things are used, but also knowing how they're actually constructed as well. And so there's different modes of play. The most advanced mode is using all 3 rings and super high level clue cards, but you can actually just play with 2 rings and create a normal Venn diagram. And what is even more brilliant about this game is that where the rings overlap, some of the objects could apply for more than one of these rules. And that's where you go, oh my goodness, it fits in the red ring and the blue ring. So what's bigger than a person, but it's also useful as well. And so your brain is just going, what is going on? What is connecting these things together? If you've ever played games like Carcassonne, we know that the tile laying genre has been around for a while. It's actually evolved quite a lot actually. We started with square tiles, then we had hex tiles, and then we also had polyomino tiles, which is basically like Tetris style tiles, but with different amounts of segments to them. And so the conglomeration and evolution of those tile laying games is something that kind of has pushed the genre along quite a bit. And I am a huge fan of tile laying games, just because you feel like you're building something, you're laying out this foundation or creating this spatial synergy. And I love puzzles that really tap into that. So one of my favorite tile laying games from this year was a game about building a civilization, but with different landmarks. Very, very strange theme, because geographically I'm not sure how this all comes together, because when I played this game, someone said, how does this game thematically work? It's a game called World Wonders, where you're trying to build lots of wonders on your player board. And so I guess I kind of likened it to going to Las Vegas. On one side, you can go to the Venetian. On the other side, you can go to Rome. On the other side, you can go to the Eiffel Tower. Take your pick. So World Wonders is such a cool game where every player has a certain number of coins that they get to spend on their turn. But then as you spatially create different configurations, you'll be able to acquire these world wonders and build them on your board. Yes, this game has a very high level of colorful visual presence, but I also just love the spatial planning of this game. It just really matches well. And I've kind of put a cap on my collection on terms of how many polyomino games I own, but this one just had such a unique look to it. And I actually bought the Mundo expansion, which actually came with like 8 new wonders. And I know that whilst the game can feel a little bit longer than it needs to be, just when I step back and see the city that I've built and I kind of imagine myself walking along the streets, it's just so much fun. And the next game I want to recommend is probably my puzzle game of the year. It's one of those games where no one heard anything about the game, but then as soon as I played it and people started talking about it, all of a sudden it went from down here to up here in terms of popularity, interest, and people were like, you know what, this game is gonna last a long time. It is a game called Harmonies. Harmonies is a game where you're kind of building these habitats, which is represented by these little round discs on your player board. You're gonna be drafting different terrain tiles, and the terrain tiles, the way you connect them together, have their own way of scoring. So for example, if you connect the blue water tiles, you'll create a long river, which will help you to get points at the end of the game. The wheat fields want to be in pairs or more. You've also got these little villages, and you've also got trees and mountain ranges wanting to be connected together. So what does this do that's different from a lot of other games? Well, you're trying to deploy these animals into the habitats. And so you get these animal cards, which have little tokens on them. And when you build the particular habitat configuration, the animal token then gets placed onto your map. And there are 2 interesting things about that. By placing the animal token on your map, it stops you from placing any future animal tokens in that space. It also stops you from building on top of that space. And so what you're trying to do in Harmonies is trying to mirror the patterns, rotate the patterns. So if you've got frogs or something, and you want to put out your frogs into the water, you might reuse the same grass tile for all of the different frogs you're going to deploy. And so you're trying to overlay everything on top of each other and create these symmetrical patterns that use all of the pieces in this very condensed area in multiple ways. It really feels next level. I've got to play a really giant version of this game earlier this year, and that version was so much fun because the pieces were like ginormous and replacing these giant pieces out on the map. Now, a lot of the board games I like to play with my hubby are usually 2 players because he's the person I play the most board games with. But I often find that there's certain game categories that do get neglected, especially around Christmas time, because Christmas time, you're actually going to have a lot of people around. And so this next category is one that I actually haven't done before, but I think it's a game category that I want to delve into more with. And it is games that are perfect for 4 players. When you think of the ultimate number of playing board games, actually maybe solo or 2 players, no, actually, 4 players often is the number that pops into your mind. And so this is a game placed terribly at 2, pretty okay at 3, but 4 is the sweet spot. It's a game that I actually was like, oh, I'm not really interested in it. But then when I played it at PlayCon early this year, a game convention hosted by the Board Game Barbecue, I was like, I'm gonna get this. This is a highly interactive game without feeling very mean. And it's an auctioning game. That is something also I don't normally play, but it just works so good. It is a game called Skyrise. It is a game that is based on an older game called Metropolis. And you're basically given a set of different buildings, there's some public scoring cards, and each district on the 5 islands on the game have these little discs. And so what you're doing is you're creating bids by placing a tower that's higher in value than the person before you. And so you end up having this snake bidding that kind of creates this pathway across the map and the districts on the game. And whoever wins the auction gets to leave their building there, they get to claim the token where they finish, and all the other players take their buildings back and use them on subsequent rounds. The scoring of each of the districts is incredibly cool because you're trying to fill up these rows, and the filling up the rows is like your multiplier for your end game scoring. You then get these secret landmark objectives in the second half of the game, which gives you a one-off power that is super game changing. That kind of really helps to swing the game in your favor. But I just love the level of interaction and how you've got to kind of decide where you're going to go next. And towards the end of the game, as the city fills up, you kind of create these little bubble pockets, and you can actually create these cool claiming combos where you can go, oh, I can place any value building in this little pocket because no one else can put a building around it. And it's incredibly satisfying. We all have that person in our family who loves doing the crosswords in the newspaper, and these days it's more like connections and Wordle. And so if you're looking for a game gift idea for someone who's a little bit of a word sleuth, I have the one for you. Rather than letting them do their own Wordle experience, how about you join in on the action with a game called Fiction? This is Wordle inspired. One person takes on the role of the librarian, L-I-E, brarian, and you basically have a word that the other players have to guess. And so the trick or the little twist in this game is that the librarian has to tell the truth except for one of the clues that they give as feedback. So if someone guesses the word frost, maybe the letter R is in the real word, but the librarian can give a fake answer, and the players at the table will not know which of the responses the librarian is giving that is the fake answer. And if the players at the table can guess the word before the number of guesses runs out, they win. If the librarian can get away with their lie, then they win. It is basically Wordle, but in a team game mode. And I feel like this is a great kind of discussion experience of like, what words do you know? And I really like this game because no one feels alone in terms of when it comes to guessing words, and people who might not be very strong or confident in themselves with, anagrams of words the collective group working together kind of alleviates some of that pressure. Now, the Christmas holidays is often a time when people tend to get into like disagreements, either over presents they didn't really want or someone that, shunned them last Christmas. So cooperative games are a great way of bringing people together and putting those issues to the side. Not sure that's healthy, but cooperative games are good. So the cooperative game I would recommend for people who don't like the head-to-head conflict of other games and the competitiveness of other games. It's a game that's all about repairing the planet, making sure that we don't contribute to climate change and global warming. It is actually this year's Spiel des Jahres winner. It's called Daybreak. It is by Matt Leacock, the designer of Pandemic. Daybreak is a fantastic cooperative game because there's immense amounts of card play. Each play takes on a world superpower, either China, the US, parts of Europe, or the rest of the world, and each play is going to have an asymmetric starting hand of 5 different cards, and you're basically building 5 columns of cards filled with different tags that are going to trigger, and you're ultimately trying to reduce the amount of carbon your country or your continent is producing. You're then trying to invest into green renewable energies, and what's really cool about this game is how you actually use the tags in your columns to trigger and power up and strengthen the effects of your actions. You're trying to clear all those fossil fuel sources on your board and try and invest in, green energy, but then also you're trying to make sure that everyone living in your part of the world is happy. So you've kind of got this balance and this tipping point of trying to be quite green with what you're investing in, but also try to balance out the happiness of the people. I really love the unique nature of the cards and how thematically each one is tied into the game itself. At the end of every round, if you have too many carbon cubes, they convert into temperature bands that kind of contributes to kind of like players' loss of the game. You're also subjected to some random events of, polar ice caps melting, deforestation, changing in weather temperatures that really try and thwart your plans. And so with everyone's kind of asymmetric set of actions, and the way that you're acquiring new cards and placing them under or over other cards, it really creates a very unique and thematic experience. And I found that this is kind of like a lighter version of kind of like games like Spirit Island. This one is really easy to grasp, but the conversations that you have around the table about what should I do, how should I help improve the world's climate and the amount of carbon we're emitting, it just really leans into that theme and that message so strongly and powerfully. So what did you think of my Christmas list? Were there any other board games that I might have missed out on? If you really found this video super helpful, or you just want more board game Christmas gift ideas, please check out some of my other annual board game Christmas gift videos, which I've left the links in the description box below. Feel free to check out some of those other recommendations because those are also quite valuable games that other people will enjoy and hopefully that you'll enjoy. Maybe you want to buy a little gift for yourself and say thank you to yourself for being restrained about buying so many board games throughout the year, then go for it. Thank you once again for joining me for another Board Game Sanctuary video. Please consider buying me a coffee by joining my Patreon and heading over to my main YouTube page and checking out some of my other board game videos there. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.